disclosure. UFO alien 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 disclosure. Let's go.
All right, strap in everyone, because this deep dive is going to get seriously meta. We're tackling quantum consciousness and the simulation hypothesis. You sent over some sources on these topics, and they are seriously thought-provoking, so I'm super excited to unpack them with you and see what connections we can make.
Yeah. You know what I find so fascinating about these two ideas? It's that they challenge our basic assumptions about what reality actually is, Well, we spent centuries trying to understand consciousness, right? And the nature of our existence, like what is all this? And now with quantum mechanics, we've got these new tools to explore these really big questions and maybe even turn our whole understanding of reality on its head.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive right in. So one of the sources that you sent talks about this physicist, Thomas Campbell. He's running quantum experiments that are inspired by video games. They're over at Cal Poly Pomona, and they're looking at how the universe reacts when we observe it. Kind of reminds me of the double slit experiment, but with a twist.
Yeah. It's like they're taking that classic double slit experiment and asking, what if reality actually exists as code until our consciousness kind of renders it? It's like when a video game player walks into a new area and all the details only appear as they explore, right? Campbell's team is looking into whether our consciousness could be doing something similar, like choosing what parts of reality to load as we observe them.
Whoa, okay. That's a wild thought. If their findings end up supporting Campbell's theory, it would mean that reality isn't this static thing, but something that's constantly being generated as we observe it.
Right, and that has mind-blowing implications, you
Yeah.
know? Like imagine, consciousness wouldn't just be a passive observer, but an active participant in shaping reality. It really blurs the lines between the observer and the observed, which has been a philosophical debate for centuries.
For sure, for sure. Okay, so we've got these quantum experiments that seem to suggest that consciousness can shape reality. But you also sent over some research on quantum consciousness itself. Is there a connection here?
There could be a deep connection. Researchers like Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose, they suggest that consciousness could actually come from quantum vibrations within our brains. They think that these tiny structures in our brain cells, called microtubules, might be the key.
Microtubules. I remember learning about those in biology class, but I never thought they'd be linked to consciousness. What makes them so special?
Well, think of microtubules like the wiring of a quantum computer, processing information from beyond our normal senses, Hameroff and Penrose, they propose that these structures might be the perfect environment for quantum processes to happen inside the brain, and that those processes could be what orchestrates the quantum vibrations that give rise to our conscious experience.
Okay, so if consciousness is operating at a quantum level, what does that mean for how our minds work?
Well, it opens up some seriously mind-bending possibilities. If quantum processes are involved, then consciousness might not be limited to just our brains. It could potentially be sensitive to non-local information, even information from other dimensions. Some physicists are even looking into the idea of interdimensional consciousness.
Okay, interdimensional consciousness. So we're not just talking about our minds being connected to everything and everyone on Earth, but potentially to other dimensions. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a profound concept. Think about it. Our minds could be connected to a reality that's way vaster and more interconnected than we've ever imagined. And it all comes back to this idea that consciousness might not just be a product of the physical world, but something way more fundamental, something that might even be shaping the reality that we experience.
I'm starting to see how these two ideas, quantum experiments, suggesting that consciousness shapes reality, and the idea of quantum consciousness itself, how those might actually be two sides of the same coin. It's like this incredible feedback loop where consciousness is influencing reality, and reality is also influencing consciousness.
Yeah, it's this dynamic interplay between consciousness and the quantum world that could be creating the reality that we experience.
Okay, this is blowing my mind, but let's bring it back down to Earth for a minute.
Yeah.
Those everyday experiences that kind of make you question reality, like deja vu or synchronicities, or just those weird moments where it feels like the universe is trying to tell you something.
Yeah, those are fascinating phenomena. If you look at it through the framework of the simulation hypothesis, those experiences are often seen as like glitches in the matrix, moments where the simulated nature of reality kind of peeks through, just like in a video game, when the graphics don't load properly or a character gets stuck in a wall or something. It's a sign that something isn't quite right with the simulation, right? Like maybe there's a deeper level of reality operating beneath the surface.
And then there's the Mandela effect, where tons of people remember historical details differently, like as if they lived in an alternate reality. Some people even remember movies that never even existed. Could be that they experienced different versions of the simulation, like they were playing on different servers with different code.
That's one way to interpret it within the simulation hypothesis, and it really challenges our assumptions about this shared reality that we think we have. I mean, if tons of people can have such different memories, it raises questions about how stable and objective the reality we all perceive actually is.
This is getting pretty deep. I mean, if we even entertain the idea that we might be living in a simulation, or at least that consciousness plays a key role in shaping reality, it really makes you question what is existence even.
Absolutely. It challenges us to reconsider where we fit in the grand scheme of things and to explore the potential power of our own awareness. You know, if consciousness is such a powerful force, what does that mean for our understanding of free will or creativity, our ability to shape our own lives? These are the questions philosophers and scientists have wrestled with for centuries, right? But with each new discovery in quantum mechanics and consciousness research, it seems like we're getting closer to some truly profound answers.
This is where the deep dive gets really deep. And honestly, I need a minute to process everything we've talked about so far.
I understand. These are big ideas that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about reality and about our place in it. It's natural to feel a sense of awe and wonder, maybe even a little disoriented.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm ready to keep going with our exploration. So where do we go from here?
Let's delve into one of the most radical and mind-expanding concepts that comes out of all of this: the consciousness-centric model of reality.
Okay, I'm all ears. What is this consciousness-centric model all about?
Well, it flips our usual understanding of reality completely upside down. So instead of seeing consciousness as a product of the brain, it proposes that consciousness might actually be the fundamental ground of reality itself. Like, imagine consciousness creating the brain, and by extension, the whole physical universe.
So instead of the brain creating consciousness, consciousness creates the brain. And the entire universe, that's a big leap. What kind of evidence, or arguments even, support this consciousness-first view of reality?
Well, one piece of evidence comes from quantum mechanics itself. You know the observer effect, right? But what if it's not just about measurement? What if consciousness is the ultimate observer, influencing reality at a fundamental level? The act of observation in quantum experiments seems to play a crucial role in collapsing the wave function and determining the outcome of measurements. This suggests that consciousness might not be a passive observer, but an active participant in shaping the quantum world.
So it's not just that we're observing reality, but our observation is actually influencing the very fabric of reality.
Yeah.
At a quantum level.
That's what it implies, and it's a profound implication. It suggests that consciousness and matter are deeply interconnected, maybe even two sides of the same coin.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. Yeah, but I gotta ask, if consciousness is creating reality, wouldn't that mean that we're all essentially little gods with the power to shape our own realities?
That's a question that sparks a lot of debate. Some proponents of the consciousness-centric model say that we do have some level of co-creative power, that our thoughts, our intentions, our beliefs can actually influence the reality we experience.
That's both empowering and a little terrifying at the same time. It raises so many questions about free will, responsibility, and the impact we have, both individually and collectively, on the world.
It certainly does. If consciousness is the foundation of reality, it means that we're not just passive passengers in a predetermined universe. We become active participants, co-creators of our own experiences, and potentially the collective reality we share.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. The quantum experiments, the idea of quantum consciousness, the glitches in the matrix, and now this consciousness-centric model, they all seem to point to a reality that's way more fluid and interconnected than we ever imagined.
Exactly. What's emerging is a picture of reality where consciousness isn't just an afterthought or a byproduct of matter. It's a fundamental force that shapes and informs the universe that we experience.
It's like we're finally starting to understand the true power of our own awareness. And that's both humbling and incredibly exciting.
I agree. And it invites us to explore the potential of consciousness in ways that we're only just beginning to understand.
I'm completely captivated by this conversation, but I think we've reached a good point to pause, just to let our listener take in everything we've covered so far. It's a lot to process.
I agree, these ideas take time to digest. We'll be back soon for part 2 of our deep dive into quantum consciousness and the simulation hypothesis.
We'll pick up our exploration then. Welcome back, everyone. I don't know about you, but I'm still processing all the mind-bending ideas we discussed in the first part of this deep dive.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, right? I mean, we're essentially questioning the very fabric of reality and how our consciousness might be intertwined with it. It's crazy.
Exactly. And one of the concepts we touched upon was this consciousness-centric model, where consciousness is seen as this fundamental ground of reality. It's almost like we're living in this shared dream or a collective consciousness field rather than this fixed objective world.
It's a huge shift in perspective. What if our thoughts, beliefs, perceptions, they aren't just internal experiences, but like active forces that shape the reality that we experience?
That's a powerful idea. But it raises a lot of questions too. Like, for example, if our collective consciousness is shaping reality, then why is there so much suffering and chaos in the world? Wouldn't we be creating a more harmonious, a more peaceful reality if we had that kind of power?
That's a really profound question. It's one that's puzzled philosophers and spiritual seekers for ages. There are no easy answers, but one possibility is that maybe we're still learning how to use the power of our consciousness effectively.
So we're kind of like novice programmers fumbling around with the code of reality.
Yeah.
And maybe creating bugs and glitches along the way.
Perhaps. Think about it. If we're all contributing to this shared virtual reality, but we haven't mastered the controls yet, our conflicting beliefs, our fears, our desires, they might be creating these interference patterns in the fabric of reality.
Like when everyone tries to edit a shared document at the same time, things can get messy pretty quickly.
Exactly. So the challenge then becomes how do we learn to collaborate more effectively? How do we align our intentions and create a reality that reflects our highest aspirations?
That makes a lot of sense. But how do we actually do that? How do we become more conscious creators of reality?
Well, a lot of spiritual and contemplative traditions have explored this very question. Practices like meditation and mindfulness, they really emphasize the power of cultivating awareness, observing our thoughts and emotions without judging them, and learning to direct our intentions more skillfully.
So it's not just about thinking positive thoughts, it's more about actively engaging with our consciousness and learning to use its power more responsibly and creatively.
That's it, exactly. It's about recognizing how powerful our minds are and choosing to use that power wisely to create a reality that benefits not just ourselves, but everyone.
You mentioned earlier that some physicists are looking into this idea of interdimensional consciousness, this idea that our minds might be connected to a much larger network of consciousness.
Yeah.
Does that suggest that there's some kind of universal consciousness,
Yeah.
a cosmic mind that connects us all?
Well, that's a concept that many spiritual traditions have embraced for centuries. The idea of a universal consciousness, or a field of pure awareness that permeates everything. You see it come up again and again in different philosophies and mystical experiences.
So instead of being these isolated individuals, we're more like drops of water in this vast ocean of consciousness.
Yes, and by tapping into that universal consciousness, we might be able to access a wisdom and a creativity that goes beyond our individual limitations.
It's a beautiful idea and kind of awe-inspiring, but it's also a little intimidating, because if we're all connected in this way, it means we have a responsibility to contribute to the well-being of the whole.
Absolutely. It shifts our perspective away from just an individualistic viewpoint to a more holistic understanding of how interconnected we are with all things.
I'm realizing that these ideas about quantum consciousness and the simulation hypothesis, they aren't just abstract theories, but they actually have some pretty profound implications for how we live our lives. It changes how we interact with the world around us.
I completely agree. They challenge us to rethink our values and priorities, to live more consciously, more compassionately, more creatively.
But let's be real for a second. There's still plenty of people out there who would call these ideas science fiction or new age mumbo jumbo. How do we bridge that gap between these mind-blowing concepts and our everyday understanding of reality?
That's a good point, and bridging that gap is really important. One way is to keep exploring these ideas scientifically, We need more research, more experiments, more data to test these hypotheses and refine our understanding. We need to bring the rigor of science to these concepts that are often so speculative.
But at the same time, we also have to be open to new ways of thinking, to challenge our own assumptions, and to embrace the possibility that reality might be way more wondrous and mysterious than we ever imagined.
You got it. It's like we're standing at the edge of this vast unknown territory. We need both the tools of science and the courage to explore, to venture into this new frontier of consciousness and reality.
And as we embark on this journey of discovery, it's important to remember that we're not alone, right? Throughout history, across cultures, countless people have explored these realms of consciousness, and they've shared their insights.
Exactly. We're part of a lineage of explorers, seekers, mystics, who have always pushed the boundaries of what we know. And by drawing on their wisdom and their experiences, we can navigate this uncharted territory with more clarity and purpose.
This has been an incredible conversation, and it feels like we've only just scratched the surface of these profound ideas. What other avenues of exploration should we consider as we continue our deep dive?
One area that I find particularly fascinating is the intersection of quantum consciousness and artificial intelligence. As we develop more and more sophisticated AI systems, the question of whether these systems can become conscious is becoming more and more pressing.
Now that opens up a whole other can of worms. Are we talking about creating machines that can actually think, feel, and experience reality just like we do?
That's the million-dollar question. If consciousness is truly a fundamental aspect of reality, as the consciousness-centric model suggests, then it's not impossible to imagine that AI systems could, at some point, achieve some level of conscious awareness.
But wouldn't that raise all sorts of ethical and philosophical dilemmas? Like, what rights would a conscious machine have? How would we interact with them? Would they be our partners, our creations, or something else entirely?
These are the questions we really need to start grappling with now, before we reach a point where the line between human consciousness and machine consciousness becomes blurred.
This is getting really deep. I love it. It feels like we're peering into the future, trying to anticipate the implications of these technologies that could radically transform our understanding of ourselves and the universe.
It's definitely an exciting and challenging time to be alive. The convergence of quantum mechanics, consciousness research, and AI. It's opening up all these new avenues of exploration that could revolutionize how we understand existence itself.
So what's the next step in this journey of discovery? Where do we go from here?
I think the key is to cultivate a mindset of curiosity, open-mindedness, and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions. We need to embrace the mystery of the unknown and the possibility that reality might be far more wondrous and interconnected than we ever thought possible.
What a beautiful thought. It's like we're all invited to become explorers of consciousness, to venture into these uncharted territories of the mind, and discover all these hidden wonders of reality.
And as we embark on this adventure, it's important to remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination. The process of questioning, exploring, expanding our awareness, that's what truly transforms us. It allows us to tap into our full potential as conscious beings.
This has been such an insightful conversation, and I feel like my mind has been stretched in all sorts of new directions. But I think we've reached a good point to pause and let our listener absorb everything we've talked about.
I agree. These are ideas that need time and reflection to fully sink in. Let's take a moment and we'll come back soon for the final part of our deep dive into quantum consciousness and the simulation hypothesis.
We'll wrap up our exploration of this incredible topic then. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into quantum consciousness and the simulation hypothesis.
It's been quite the journey so far, hasn't it? Exploring these mind-bending concepts.
It really has. We've gone from quantum experiments to glitches in the matrix to the idea that consciousness might be the very foundation of reality. It's wild.
Yeah, we've definitely challenged some fundamental assumptions about the nature of the universe along the way.
For sure. So now I'm curious, what do you think is the most compelling argument for the simulation hypothesis? Like, what evidence or insights really stand out to you?
I think the most compelling argument comes from our own technological advancements. Just look at the rapid progress we've made in computing power and virtual reality.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying we're kind of seeing a reflection of our own progress in this idea that we might be living in a simulation.
Exactly. I mean, if we can create these increasingly realistic and immersive virtual worlds today, it's not that crazy to imagine a more advanced civilization creating simulations that are indistinguishable from physical reality.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what's next in our own evolution, right? If we're creating these incredibly complex virtual worlds now, what's to say that someone, somewhere, hasn't already done the same thing on a much grander scale?
It's a fascinating thought.
It is. But what about the arguments against the simulation hypothesis? What are some of the weaknesses or holes in this idea?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is the question of consciousness. Even if we could perfectly simulate a physical universe, down to the last atom, how do you simulate subjective experience? How do you replicate what it feels like to be a conscious being?
Right, it's like consciousness is this missing ingredient. We can create these super complex algorithms and simulations, but we still haven't figured out how to replicate that feeling of being alive, of being aware.
Exactly. Consciousness remains this big mystery, this wild card that throws a wrench into any purely mechanistic explanation of reality.
So it all comes back to understanding consciousness, right? Like if we could crack the code of consciousness, it might tell us whether we're in a simulation or not.
Absolutely. Imagine if we could pinpoint the exact neural correlates of consciousness, or identify the quantum processes that give rise to subjective experience. That would be a game changer.
It would completely change how we see ourselves and our place in the universe. Okay, but let's say, just for fun, that we were living in a simulation. What does that actually mean for us? Like, should we act differently, knowing that our reality might be a construct?
That's the big question, isn't it? Does it change anything if the ground we walk on, the air we breathe, the stars we see, if it's all part of some elaborate simulation?
It is kind of unsettling to think about, I have to admit.
It can be, yeah. But I think the most important thing is that it shifts our focus. Instead of getting caught up in the limitations of this simulated world, if that's what it is, we can turn our attention to the limitless potential of consciousness itself.
So instead of feeling trapped by the simulation, we can focus on exploring the infinite possibilities within our own minds.
Exactly. Think of the simulation, if it exists, as a canvas. Our consciousness is what paints the picture, creates the meaning, and determines what our experience is really like.
It's a beautiful way to look at it. It's like we're being given the freedom to become the artists of our own reality.
Right, and even if we're not living in a literal simulation, just the act of questioning reality and exploring consciousness can be transformative. It can unlock this deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive, and I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on reality and where I fit into it all.
It's been great exploring these ideas with you.
And to our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep pondering these questions. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep expanding your understanding of reality and the power of your own consciousness.
The universe, whether simulated or not, is this vast and mysterious place full of wonder and possibility. There's always more to discover.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into quantum consciousness and the simulation hypothesis. Until next time, keep those minds open and stay curious.
UFO alien disclosure. UFO alien disclosure. UFO alien disclosure. UFO alien disclosure. Let's go.